In 1985, Dario Argento created one of his most ambitious films. Phenomena combines some interestingly fleshed out scientific concepts with traditional horror storytelling. I am the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So, as always, a very interesting experience, I suppose, returning to a film like this that I had watched initially as a much younger person. Um, as we know, it's not necessarily a review show per se, is this podcast, but I do think it's, especially with these Argento films, these 80s Argento films, I can't help but get a little bit distracted by the quality or sometimes lack thereof, sometimes extreme potential that to me is rarely entirely lived up to. Having now watched and done, I think, all of these 80s films, at least at the conclusion of this podcast, in recent months on this show, I am quite confident that Tenebrae was comfortably his best film in this period, and that perhaps Phenomena had the most potential, but it's squandered somewhat. So I remember a long time ago when I'd gone on a bit of a horror film DVD buying rampage, as was a thing that you would do in the sort of 2010 type region. One of the films that I'd come across was this Phenomena. I think I'd watched it and I sat down with my brother and we watched a little bit of it together. He was never as keen on the Italian horror films as I. And he got very annoyed at the first few seconds of the film, and I think he was right too. That there's a certain nothing to the initial shot. It's not a particularly compelling shot, except if memory serves. It's got the wonderful mountains in the background. Something that I might get to, the setting that isn't utilized very effectively in this film. But it's just this fairly boring shot of a bus and a road, and you're like, okay, it just feels a bit Jeepers Creepers too. But I really don't think that at the time, because I've become much more of an aficionado of horror film music, but particularly Italian horror film music, I really don't think I'd appreciated at the time just how incredibly good this opening scene is. I stand by my agreement with my brother at the time that the initial few seconds aren't great. I don't think it's helped by the acting / dubbing from Vera Brandt, whoever plays her. But to be honest, I think it's a dubbing a little bit, but the atmosphere that this film sets up in this opening scene is quite genuinely extraordinary, and it's one of those things that reminds you of why Argento was so great in the first place. So yes, there are memorable scenes from his earlier movies, this of gore and violence. I think straight off, like the opening scene in Suspiria, but for mine, the most memorable thing about a film like that is the use of sound and atmosphere, cinematography in a number of scenes, but particularly the blind man walking his dog. And this opening scene, in some ways, is vintage Argento. To the point that even if the death itself is a little bit campy, the way we cut to that very awkward shot of a head going through the window, which by this point in Argento's career he'd officially was a concept I think he'd officially become obsessed with. That shot's not amazing, you appreciate just how much work he put into, and we're still putting into getting the atmosphere right. So, um, I guess in a sense, this scene does begin to come into its own as Vera walks up towards the house, and it's one of those moments. There's a classic horror moments where the music, the camera is simply telling you how extraordinarily ominous a situation is for a character when otherwise there would be nothing. This score in this film, or at least the one that's used in this scene, I'll probably edit that in, and you might have already heard a bit of it after the intro there. The score is truly sensational. And the way it starts really ramping up as she's sort of wandering around the side of the house is like, this is brilliant. And the thing is, it's not necessarily the most horror-esque musicianship I've ever heard. I think it's probably one of the rare occasions in his Argento's, I would say, fairly regrettable obsession at times with heavy metal or heavy metal adjacent music, where a sort of at least heavy metal-ish sounding inspired score contributed to the horror in an effective way. There's a level of vibrancy and ominous aggression that comes through that I think he probably started to build up with Goblin, to be honest. But you know, I think the music that he was helping create his atmosphere at this point of his career was a little bit hit and miss, but in this moment, it's absolutely not miss at all. Um, the payoff, as I say, the decapitation itself is a bit silly. The way the chain goes around her neck, not amazing. But additionally to just that sense of atmosphere, the way this scene sets up the setting in general, and the sense that the environment in this film is a danger, or at least is quite ominous, is very, very effective. So, if I were reviewing just this opening scene, I would say this film is an absolute raging success, despite a couple of the scene's shortcomings. It's from there, though, that I just think it's just a little bit all over the place. I'm fascinated when I read in various forums and online type places where you get people's opinions. That quite a few people will be a little bit critical of the 80s films, but then you get the occasional person who will pluck out one of them and say, "Oh, this is Argento's best film," and you see that occasionally for Phenomena. I, for the life of me, can't understand why. Because as much as most of Argento's films, probably up to this one, have something going for them, I just don't. I just don't think there's any element of this film that Argento hasn't done significantly better in the past. So I'm sure we'll touch on most of these things, but the characterization it's like nearly there. It's a cool little crossover that a very young Jennifer Connelly and a beginning to age Donald Pleasance. Like, I must say, I remembered their rapport being a lot more effective than it actually is. I don't know if Jennifer Connelly she's clearly a good actress. I think it's either her first film or a very, very early one. I don't think she's used very well in her interaction with other characters, and I don't think it's a poor performance necessarily. Again, I think some of the dubbing, often in the 80s, the dubbing of Italian films, horror films, is a little bit worse than the 70s. I think because it's like their techniques had evolved slightly, but that they hadn't quite nailed them yet, or something like that. So they were a little bit more ambitious and often not particularly effective. But none of the relationships that she has with other characters are entirely convincing. I think this is maybe partly that effect of Argento not particularly caring about character at this point in his career, which makes me think, well, if that's the case, then why bother getting a particularly good actor? I mean, I guess he didn't know that Jennifer Connelly was going to go on and have a sufficiently prominent career. Her relationship with her friend is nothing, like, at all. But I'll get to that. And then, like, you go to the end of the film, and there's the moment where the monkey comes and saves or whatever, and they embrace, and it ends. And it's like, is this really what happened in this movie? Was it Jennifer Connelly and this monkey? Was that the logical conclusion of this movie? It didn't feel like that's what we were working towards. But anyway, so I think we have an excellent concept. I think that there are trailers for this film that are magnificent. It seems convincing, and then it just isn't quite right. It just isn't quite. So the opening scene occurs about 8 months before the rest of the film. So I'll follow the plot along, as I tend to do with the Wikipedia one, because they get some really decent ones. So it's John McGregor. John McGregor is Donald Pleasance, the entomologist, and he's having a conversation with the police, and they have some generic discussions about there being a string of murders of young women. So this scene sort of forefronts something that Argento would do occasionally, more throughout the 70s, where there'd be some kind of scientific thing that he seems to be interested in, or just a moment where you need an expert, right? Like the bird with the crystal plumage, both the film and that moment, where there's a person who seems to know about birds, and there's a discovery, or then there's the eye thing that seems quite questionable in Is It Four Flies on Grey Velvet, and then the XY chromosome thing that I think was big at the time, but turned out to be bunk in Cat o' Nine Tails. He forefronts the big moment, like for the second scene of the movie, which seems strategically advantageous because definitely this film wants to be about the bugs, right? And I'm just not sure. I think it's accidental. I'm not sure the film quite commits itself to the bugs very well enough. Look, I apologise if I missed something here, but does the film offer any explanation as to why Jennifer Connelly has this affinity with bugs? Like, we know she likes them, and we know they seem to understand her. Does the film offer any explanation as to the weird kid at the end? Why he is evil? Why his mum is evil? Now, okay, they say that garbage about the wind, and the winds make some people crazy or whatever. But now, that feels to me like some kind of mythology, and it's cool in a way. It is. It's like I like the idea that we're in a fairly unfamiliar place for most people, right? Switzerland is it's like a far-flung place that people want to go to. It's beautiful. I think, as I say, I think they make some use of the scenery. And it sounds sort of like a local mythos thing that we're doing. I don't know if that's correct. It's not even that important to me whether it is correct. It just feels like a half-baked idea, or a not quite convincing enough thing or device is a better word than thing. That is like, when you want certain things in your movie, you need to stick devices in there to as a means to get those things in there. And we want this crazy Dario Niccolodi character. We want some strange little children / short little adult looking people. We want the affinity with the bugs. We want all that. But it just puts those things there and doesn't really explain it. It's like almost having no explanation would be more convincing, because it would just be the film acknowledging we don't really care about this. But half caring is not a good way of doing it. So anyway, I've got a little bit distracted there. The scene of Donald Pleasance talking to the cops is all very well and good. I don't have a big problem with it, except to say that it sets up a bit of a trend of Donald Pleasance. I'm not going to say phoning it in, although he does seem to do all of his scenes in this one room. And he's certainly not at like Halloween 6 levels of immobilization. Maybe that's not the right word. But he doesn't feel... It feels very much like there's a movie and Donald Pleasance is in it. It's not like he's a cohesive part of the movie. There's a movie and then there's also Donald Pleasance. And, he's a famous entomologist or whatever. But it's like, I'm not convinced that this world that the film's created, that he was a natural sort of element of the world, if you know what I mean. It just seems a little bit contrived to me. But that's okay. So, Jennifer is her name. Is Jennifer Connelly's name. So that's good. She's Jennifer Corvino, which seems to be a nice little Italian reference. So she is taken to a school which seems to be... what is the school, actually? It says he arrives at the Swiss Richard Wagner Academy for Girls, which feels basically either like a reference to Suspiria or just a lack of extra creativity beyond Suspiria, where we've basically got a very... Well, basically an identical premise, actually. Teenage girl goes to school of other girls. They don't... I don't know if they ever establish what the school is. It was a dancing school in Suspiria. At least we know that quite definitively. So she goes there, and she's met with a few bitchy older women. She's chaperoned by Frau Bruckner, who is, I believe, Dario Niccolodi's character. And there's that scene where they're in the car, and there's a fly in there, and it's a bee. I think it's a bee, and Jennifer's all wanting to save it, and the driver and Dario Niccolodi are all freaking out, and like they're really, really freaking out, especially Dario Niccolodi. It's like, well, unless this was going to be very significant later in the film, you sort of feel like it wouldn't be in there. But again, it's just Jennifer's love of insects. It isn't really explained. They show it, they don't necessarily explain it. So this is where, and we're not very far in, this is where the film does begin to not convince me. Again, dubbing doesn't help, but like, frankly, I think the film needed to find a character of some note, not that much note, but some note, to kill earlier in the film because she has her conversation with whoever her friend's name is. Sophie. Is it Sophie? Or maybe Sophie's a different one. The following night, the murderer kills Sophie, mistaking her for Jennifer. She is wearing the same sweater she wore when she witnessed the prior murder. Mm. Yeah, no, it is. It is her. So she has a very unconvincing discussion with Sophie, and by unconvincing, I mean it's like the film desperately wants us to believe that they're becoming friends, and they sort of bond over, smoking while the principal or whatever woman doesn't apparently notice, even though it seems very obvious. Um, I understand they're trying to do this rebel teenage thing, but they're entirely unconvincing. They don't look like rebels, and they're so sweet to each other that it's like, what are you really rebelling against? And then there's that stupid element that why is Jennifer the daughter of a famous movie star, and why is Sophie so excited by the fact that um, Jennifer knows him? But then when Jennifer says, "Well, he's actually my dad," Sophie doesn't seem any more like, "Oh, you know him. That's interesting." But he's your dad. That would multiply the interest by like extraordinarily. But she just doesn't seem to care at all. So it's like, if you're gonna have this scene, see it through to the purpose, right? So Jennifer does the sleepwalking thing, and I just look, I'm just not convinced that she gives a shit about Sophie at all. I just don't think she cares, because as I say, I think the characterization through this film is so unconvincing that Jennifer seems basically entirely removed from it. In fact, I will make that, or I'll bring this back to Donald Pleasance again. Both of these characters feel separate from the movie for the most part. Um, Apart from when they're with each other, which is nearly convincing. It's not entirely unconvincing, but it's just not incredible. I suspect if it had been done 5 or 6 years later, where Jennifer Connelly had a little bit more experience, then it might have come across a bit better. But so I think it feels either Argento or someone else, but probably Argento, because I know he had a lot of creative control over his films. Had a real fascination with bugs. So I think, and from memory, I think it appears in some trailers and whatnot, that the great sarcophagus flies element of things is actually really cool. I love that that Donald Pleasance gives her that fly in the box, and he explains. I mean, it's just, I get it, right? Argento's success to this point had followed a real formula. Now, I think you would say his first three Giallo films are all really in a very similar mold. Then Deep Red is a similar mold again, but the goblin element of it, the length of it, and just the quality of it take it to a different level. Then we get a similar kind of story with Suspiria, but a much different movie. Then Inferno is not amazing, and it takes the surrealistic elements of Suspiria and really hams those up and sort of throws the story in the bin. Then we get Tenebrae, which to me is basically an 80s giallo in a way. I think it would be a fair way of describing it. So, he's done mainly giallo films. He's done a western or whatever that was not successful. He's done Suspiria, which is more, it's sort of giallo and horror. But he hasn't done anything with bugs, right? So why not do some bug related stuff? And as far as the fact that it's the mid 80s, that any form of non-human entity being in your film is very, very hard to do convincingly. And I think, given the time, they don't do it too badly. There's some very unconvincing rendering where she does that big summoning of, I think, flies when they're all bullying her. But, they do it reasonably well because I think they have enough real bugs. So my point is, it looks and feels reasonably good, but they just don't quite commit to the concept enough. Like, it's nearly really cool. So the Great Sarcophagus flies, and because it's Donald Pleasance who's delivering the information, it's like, they survive exclusively on dead bodies or whatever the hell he's talking about. So that's cool. Is that true? How many dead bodies are around? And they can smell a dead body for miles away, and it's really, really cool. And in that scene, it is very cool, very Donald Pleasance. The moment where all the bugs are a bit, and there's some terrifying looking spiders. They're all a bit antsy and they're up, and then she feels calm and then they're calm. It's like you've calmed them down. So yeah, I like this. I do like this, and the concept of calling something a great sarcophagus. In fact, I'm gonna just click the link here on Wikipedia just to now. Oh, sarcophagi, sarcophagi, okay, whatever. A family of flies commonly known as flesh flies. They differ from most flies in that they are opportunistically depositing hatched or hatching maggots instead of eggs. Okay, right, they are absolutely disgusting. So, given the name and the way they're described in the film, I really just needed to confirm that. So there's an issue here, right? The film successfully makes us, I think, feel pretty good about the fact that the bugs calm down. It really does feel like they're Jennifer's friends. That's good. But the concept of befriending this bug that lives exclusively off rotting flesh, and given that the main character is a teenage girl, and this film is supposedly premised on the murder of teenage girls, and the maggots on the head of the teenage girl that's beheaded at the start of the movie, it's hard for us to go, wow, I like this fly. And I think the film really wants us to do that, right? So she gets on that train, I think, that looks a little bit like a bus, and she sits at the back, and there seems to be some people looking at her or whatever. And they would be, because she's just got a big fly in a little glass box. So anyone who's seen that, like, that's a bit strange. And Donald Pleasance tells her to go there, because it's gonna find the dead body. Now, that's cool, but one, this is a disgusting creature, and I think the film could convince us that some other bugs that we might be a little bit uncomfortable with aren't, if it's going to dispel the negative myths around bugs or whatever. But a fly known exclusively for its love of dead bodies, this is the hero for quite a few minutes in this film. We're like, okay, yeah. It's also quite silly that Donald Pleasance thinks that this is a good idea. Like, if we acknowledge, and he does, that there's a murderer on the loose, and sends her to find the dead body, or a dead body, or as it turns out, many dead bodies that were uh, murdered by people that were the bodies of people murdered by this killer. Um, why does he send her to it or to those bodies with the fly? Anyway, let's move on. So, later, when the students taunt Jennifer over her connection to insects, she summons a swarm of flies that covers the entire building, then faints. Convinced that Jennifer is diabolic and possibly responsible for the killings, the headmistress arranges for her to be transferred to a mental hospital. Yeah, so again, this is one of those things that the film has trouble with because it doesn't have an unbelievably good focus, or it has nothing like a good focus really at all. So it's like, okay, so now we're doing this she has no friends thing. I mean, hasn't her actual friend already been murdered at this point? And there's that long scene of them taunting her, and then she summons the flies. But like, look, Dario, if you're gonna do this, can you at least commit to it? It's like he doesn't really care because we don't return to it. Does he get, or does Jennifer get any comeuppance on these girls? Do they even deserve comeuppance? Is there a point to this scene? And the answer is they had a point. It was poorly executed, and it was a bad point. By that I mean, I think the Jennifer connection with the bugs element of the film is better when it's more subtle, right? When she's just got that firefly coming towards her, or she's just with one fly in a box, or she sees some maggots and or some bugs come down. When she's got this massive swarm, it's like, what are we going for here? The scale of it. Now, I guess the point is the film really, really wants to make the point, but I think it can make the point that she has the connection in which it does quite successfully make that point without going to these extremes. Then there's the other side of it that we have to consider, that he probably wanted that shot of all the bugs. But then the flip side of that is, well, it's 1985 and the shot really doesn't look that good. In fact, it looks terrible, obviously, by today's standards. But even at the time, I'm not really sure it was worth doing that, So, and then there's just the other elements of it where it's like, okay, I guess the film wants us to really care about Jennifer, but it's like it only when it feels like making us feel that way. So, the headmistress is a real bitch, but at the same time, it's like, well, in fact, I'll just note that I've got a couple of events out of order. The sarcophagus in a box scene comes after she goes to hospital. I do apologize for that. But, they want to make the point that this headmistress is a bitch and that the world's out to get Jennifer and all of that. But like, without knowing the exact definitive meaning of diabolic or diabolical, I mean, having this connection with these creatures, these bugs, it's like, well, that is something that a diabolical person would have, right? But it's like, speaking of diabolical, like, isn't that sort of what the headmistress is anyway? So she's just very stern, very serious face, very, very, very tightly tied up hair. Might as well be carrying a cane. I'm not sure if she actually does, but it's like, I don't know. I'm not sure the film's entirely committed to that concept, so that when they do it, it's, oh yeah, all right. I guess the world's out to get Jenny, even though her dad is a famous actor. I just don't quite get it. I just don't think it's quite fleshed out, pardon the pun, as well as it could or should be. I don't know. I'm probably being super harsh here, but it just doesn't sort of strike all the right notes, in my opinion. So, uh, she then has to um, she. I don't actually mind that scene too much, where um, the I think the headmistress tells the nurse to just keep an eye on her, and like all the nurse has to do is literally keep an eye on her, and the nurse just look. It's not clear how much time passes, but the nurse just goes in and sits down and just has a nap, and no matter how much noise Jennifer seems absolutely determined to make, the woman will not awake from her slumber. The nurse just refuses to wake from her slumber. It's like I don't know. I guess my point is, in a film where we've got you know uh, mental connections. I'm thinking, what's that bloody word? We'll just say mental connections within sex. We've got murderers on the loose. We've got this wonderful Swiss setting. We've got drama. We've got women that are bullies. We've got swarms of summoned bugs. It's sort of bizarre that we have this fairly lengthy scene of, the nurse isn't going to wake up and notice her escaping, is she? It's like, I don't fucking know. Who cares? Like, what's going to happen? She's going to wake up and she's going to go, oh, no, I'm leaving here. She's already done this, hasn't she? Earlier in the movie, there's that moment when they're all trying to accuse her of a bunch of things. She's like, I'm not. What does she say? I'll see if I've got the quote here, because I actually quite liked the quote, and sometimes I do note them down with the little notes that I take. Where are we? She's not normal. She's diabolical. Can't find it. But she's all, I am not crazy. I am not stoned. I am not. And then she leaves. Anyway, the point there being, she is independent enough in this film, I would think, for her just to, if the nurse sees her, just be like, well, fuck you, I'm leaving. What are you going to do about it? So anyway, they have that. She gets up, she leaves, and then we move on. So I guess I'll skip past a couple of scenes here because I've already talked about, I think, the stuff that happens immediately after. And then, yeah. So McGregor, can't remember who McGregor is. Oh wait, no, McGregor. Is that? Yeah. Is McGregor the? Hang on. Apologies for this. Yes, professional podcasting. Donald Pleasance. This isn't actually a point that I've noted at all yet. I've noted a lot of criticisms, and this is one that I really need to level at this film. Dario, my good man, if you're going to, at this point in your career, still have little staples of your film that you cannot help but have, i.e., a sort of gender neutrally dressed, ominous, darkly dressed villain / serial killer, all of that, then can you at least do it well? Because the film doesn't ever really feel like it couldn't have a normal giallo style killer. And the moment when Donald Pleasance gets killed is really the closest we get to that, because we see this dark sort of cloaked figure, I think, wearing a nice hat, and it's like, for a moment, it feels, for about 1 second, it feels like an early 70s Argento giallo, and honestly, it's quite welcome. I like that. I like that feeling. And then it's just such a nothing. You get stabbed with an umbrella, or probably not. I don't know why I said an umbrella. Probably a knife, whatever, a cane maybe. And then he's dead. And then the monkey gets upset. Okay, all right, it's like, if you want to do this bug-based horror film, Dario, we'll do that. I suppose. I don't don't get stuck in the past if you're not going to do the past properly. You know, maybe it was just an old habits die hard type thing, but it's like, look. I know I've spent a lot of time complaining. I gave I think a very good endorsement of the opening scene. I haven't said much positive since. It's just that it has so many good elements, or elements that could be good, and just they're all half baked, and it's frustrating. Um, but I guess that's what happens when you watch films that are like nearly 40 years old, just for the sake of the podcast. So they start talking about, and this is when I think the plot of the film, which is quite um, absent. They start to sort of backfill things. They talk about things that happened 4 months ago and 8 months ago, and inmates and the wind making people crazy. Something about, it says former staff member had been attacked 15 years before by one of the male inmates. I'm like, all right, whatever. The thing is, the twist or the ending of the film can never really be either a twist or at least a convincing twist, because we're like, well, any information that we get given just isn't filtered in that old classic giallo way. So when the conclusion comes along, I think we're all just a little bit nonplussed by it. Nonetheless, eventually Jennifer's sort of, she's had enough, and she's calling people up, and she's trying to sort some things out. I think she tries to get through to her dad or a lawyer or whatever. And then Bruckner, Daria Nicolodi, I think we're just going to call her Daria Nicolodi, appears. And it's quite abundantly obvious that she is dodgy, because for a start, we remember back to the scene with the bug earlier in the film, call in the car. But also, like, we're at that point of the movie where things have to start concluding. And whoever the killer happens to be, we probably need to have them around right now, So it's one of those sort of lengthy reveals that is like, it doesn't feel like the film's really trying to pull the wool over our eyes. But, nonetheless, she says that she's under instructions from, I think, Jennifer's dad to buy her a ticket to go home, whatever. And again, this is like, what is this? What is this? Nothing of a storyline. It's not like there's no storyline, but like, yeah, I'm under instructions. Like, why? Because you say so. Like, even the most arbitrary, brief analysis of everything that's going on would make anyone conclude, like, well, obviously this isn't what's happening. Like, she doesn't even bother to explain. Jennifer doesn't bother to think about it. She's immediately skeptical upon getting to the house. But again, it's like, it seems to be the skeleton of a story that could have made sense if they'd filled in a lot of gaps, but they just don't really bother filling in many of the gaps. So she goes there, and look, again, I apologize for my level of criticism here. I know I've been told by some important people in my life that I do get a little bit over analytical and over critical of films. And I mean, for goodness sake, I spent an hour saying how good Cannibal Ferox was, so I'm not entirely negative, albeit maybe not positive about the right things. But something that really just occurred to me this second. Again, the on the nose thing to make the point. Jennifer notices that all the mirrors are covered. Now, I don't know if the film's actually trying to be funny. It doesn't appear to be trying to be funny. She notices that all the mirrors are covered. And then Dario Argento says, yeah, my son is disfigured and he doesn't like to see his reflection or something. Now, if that's the case, one, why would you have lots of mirrors? But two, why would you have them and cover them up? Like, there are mirrors everywhere. Like, as in not just like in the bathroom, but like mirrors that are on walls and stuff. Now I'm just here in my apartment, just looking around. I don't have mirrors. Now, I could have mirrors. I have a mirror in my bathroom, and I'm a man. I I don't look at my reflection all that often. But the thing is, if the reason I don't have mirrors up specifically that I bought is because I don't want them there. So if you have a specific reason to not want to see your reflection or not want your son to see his reflection, just take the mirrors down. Why cover them up? But there's just a comically large number of mirrors. Not many houses have like 3 mirrors on a wall. Anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down on that, but it's actually very, very funny. And then obviously by this point, it's like the kind of thing that, okay, whatever, if we're hearing this story about the son, then why else would we be hearing this unless it's a link to some kind of, fact that she is the killer and all of that. So, there's a lot of shenanigans that go on where she tries to give her a poison pill or something. And then, obviously this is for our benefit because it's interesting to see some action. And she gives her the pill. She tells her to take the pill. And then there's this sort of lengthy exchange of them like being real bitchy and hooty tooty towards each other. But then it's like, okay, but isn't Dario Argento's plan just to kill her? So why is she trying to do this pill thing? And also, when she hears her vomiting in the bathroom, wouldn't it? And she gets all panicked. Wouldn't it just make sense because you've just given her a pill that's trying to poison her or kill her or whatever? But anyway, that's sort of for our benefit because we don't know that she's the killer at this point, apparently. And there's a few shenanigans that go on with phones and a cop or whatever. And, it's all a bit frustrating. And she crawls through some tube tunnel thing, whatever. And then she ends up in, I don't know, a basement area of the house or at least somewhere that's through the tunnel. And the cop that's tied up is like, he's there. And she falls into is what seems to be a sort of inside pool that's full of dead people and maggots and stuff. And here's the thing. It feels to me like this film was conceptualized from this scene and then everything else was worked backwards from here. I might be wrong on that, but something tells me I'm not. Or at least elements of this film are like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And then you have to work a story around it. Now, I don't want to... I'll try to efficiently sum up my problems now. Okay. With the plot. Specifically the plot. So, we have this pool of maggots and dead bodies, and it's disgusting. And she's stuck in there for ages. She doesn't seem to be, as in Jennifer, she's stuck in there. She doesn't seem to be particularly perturbed by the fact that maggots are going onto her face and even into her mouth and stuff. And it feels like actual maggots are going into Jennifer Connelly's mouth. But that's another matter. But like, look, she might be overwhelmed by the horror of it all and all that. But like, there's something very drastic about this happening in the film that makes me think like I feel like the film should make a bigger deal of it. I don't think the music gets particularly more dramatic. Jennifer Connelly doesn't really seem to care. Dario Argento's there just trying to kick her back in or whatever. Eventually, the cop guy sort of pushes Nickelodeon in, and then I guess Jennifer gets out or whatever. I'm like, okay. So Jennifer has ended in a pool of dead bodies and maggots. The maggots presumably are like the sarcophagus, the great sarcophagus fly maggots or whatever. That's sort of explained by Donald Pleasance. Donald Pleasance's character is only in it so we can have an air of expertise lent to the sort of bullshit bug element of the film. The fact that Jennifer is in this place at all is whatever. The fact that the girls who are bullying her at the school is also whatever. Given that she's done nothing wrong to them, and all that they know about her is that she's got this really famous dad. It's not clear why they're bullying her anyway, or why they're just so bitchy to her. It's not clear why the headmistress is terrible, you know. And then the other element of it is obviously we need to kill her, and we're going for some slightly supernatural stuff. So we're like, the explanation is, the winds here make people crazy. And I'm like, it's contrivance based on contrivance, based on contrivance, based on contrivance. And then the only thing to defend it is, or would be, are the set pieces worth it? The bugs, the poorly rendered bugs at the school, the falling into this pool of maggots and stuff, the kills, the final scene that I'll get to. The answer is no, not at all. It's not. It's like it's just all. It's like the end of a Saw movie, right? Where if you take away you're in for some twist, and the film's going to really ram that twist down your throat, because even if the twist is shit, there's going to be the the Saw music that's telling you how good it is, and you're going, wow. But once you look past that, you go, wait, was that really worth it? And it's like, no. So she, in this all this process, or maybe after it, she comes across a little child. Again, I might have missed something. I don't know why the child's deformed. I don't know why he's so deformed, and I don't know why he is as evil as he looks. Right? It's just, he's a scary looking kid, and he's very scary, and he's the kind of kid that if you looked at, you think, oh, well, he's going to do something bad to me, and then you look at him and he immediately does something bad. So, okay. Why is he so evil, though? Isn't his mum evil? I don't get it. So he chases her outside or whatever, and then they end up in a lake. And, we have this sort of weird standoff that involves her kicking him into the water and presuming that he's drowning. We all know he's not going to. And then she sets her boat on fire, which seems to set the water on fire. I guess that's like a petrol spill. Although if so, it's a hell of a lot of petrol for what seems like a pretty little boat. It seems to light up an entire lake. Then she's under the water and she's being dragged under the water by the little person who's burnt, and I guess there's maggots on him. I don't know. And the whole thing is just, what the fuck is this final showdown? And then eventually, I think he gets overwhelmed by the flames. I think he just burns to this. So some life he had. And then the cop comes along that we don't care about, and this is, look, it's not a horrible scene, I suppose, except it's unbelievably obvious because they're about to run up to each other and embrace, but they don't seem to have really had anything to do with each other to this extent. So you know that it's a bit of a fake out. Then she gets decapitated with. Dario Nicolotti comes from nowhere and decapitates him with this big rectangle of metal, of sheet metal, which is cool enough as a concept, I suppose, but I don't know. It just feels like the film's trying to be poetic, but I don't know what the poetry is. And then she's sort of threatening to kill Jennifer with the same sheet, and she takes too long when the monkey comes and kills her, which is cool, and then they embrace, and then it's over. And I'm like, what was that? So, there's another special mention to a moment in the film. I think it's after she sleepwalks, and I skip past this without meaning to. She wanders onto a road, and we see a few cars go past to sort of drive around her. Probably more than we need. And in hindsight, this is actually very similar to a scene in Opera. His next movie, and it's like, why'd you do this 2 films in a row, Dario? It's not that great a concept. Anyway, the cars go around, and then eventually a car sort of hits her. Not horribly, but it hits her. And the boys in the car, the 2 of them, they seem genuinely concerned. And they get her into the car, and then they drive down the road, and then they seem to be trying to rape her. I'm like, I don't know what is this? Like, I don't know why that needed to be in the movie, and I'm not one of these people that it's like, oh, it's gratuitous, because I mean anything's gratuitous. You know, the whole movie is gratuitous. Like, entertainment is gratuitous, but in the context of the movie, it didn't make any sense. Like, we've got a killer on the loose. We've got all these bugs. We've got this headmistress. We've got Dario Nicolotti. We've got her famous father who she can't get in contact with, whatever. And then there's this stupid scene, and eventually, like, they're struggling, and she falls out of the car. And they sort of look, you know, she falls down a little bit of a hill thing or a mound, and they look at her, and then they seem to agree. They're like, oh, this isn't going to look good for us. And they leave, and then we never hear of them again. And I think, what the fuck is this? Right? Why do we do that? So, in conclusion, there's a lot of things in it, but there's not a lot of connective tissue. There's some interesting scientific concepts. And by the way, I'm not one of these science snobs. Speaking of science-based snobbery, check out the horror film science podcast, the Footy Science podcast, albeit I'm not sure that'll be that relevant to Italian horror film listeners, but maybe listen to the Follow the Science podcast as well. But so there's all these scientific podcasts and concepts, and I'm not a snob about it. I like that Argento just took these concepts and put them in his movies when, you know, at least the eye thing in Four Flies and Grey Velvet is very obviously bullshit. I'm sure it was quite obviously bullshit at the time, by the way. But if you're going to just do it as a vehicle to do other stuff that you are sort of interested in without really committing to it, I just feel like you could do a little bit better than that, Dario. So I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed, I suppose. And look, the opening scene's great. The score is very great, if not used particularly well. But at the end of the day, look, it is a film that I can still watch it. I can still enjoy it. Maybe that's just me being a horror fan. It's definitely me just being an Argento fan. But I think it would be fair to say you can see the decline already in Argento. So that'll conclude my discussion. Argento, I've talked about him a lot in recent months. There are 3 more months left in the year. I'm going to be moving on to a much more obscure director by the name of Joe D'Amato. I believe he had a more anglicised sounding pseudonym. And he did the infamous film Anthropophagus, which I will be doing in 3 months' time. But next month I'll be talking about, I think, a 72 or 73 horror film by him, Death Smiles on a Murderer. Then I'll be doing Beyond the Darkness, which I haven't seen Death Smiles on a Murderer, and I have seen Beyond the Darkness, and I haven't seen Anthropophagus. So it's going to be a fun 3 months ahead, guys. I look forward to doing those episodes. Do join me for them. I am the Italian Horror Guy, and this has been the Italian Horror Guy podcast.